Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into an incredible and dramatic story about one of the most powerful figures in Chinese history, a woman who broke all the barriers and changed the course of time. Let's talk about Wu Zetian, the only woman in Chinese history to ever rule as emperor. Her rise to power wasn't just extraordinary, it was almost unheard of. In a world where women were often confined to the shadows of the men who ruled, Wu Zetian carved out a place for herself as a leader, a strategist, and a ruler who would shape the future of an entire dynasty. From the shadows of the imperial harem to sitting on the throne as the Emperor of China, her journey was filled with ambition, resilience, and political mastery. But Wu Zetian's story wasn't all about her brilliance. It was also a tale of survival, navigating treacherous courts, outsmarting rivals, and securing her place in history despite the many obstacles she faced. She wasn't just fighting for power, she was fighting for her very survival. So, today, we'll uncover how this incredible woman broke through the conventions of her time and created a legacy that still echoes through history. Have you ever wondered who the only woman to ever rule China as emperor was? How did she rise from being a mere concubine to one of the most powerful figures in history? Today, we'll explore the extraordinary story of Wu Zetian, the woman who defied all odds and rewrote history. Her journey was anything but typical. In a time when women were expected to remain in the background, Wu Zetian didn't just survive, she thrived, outwitting political rivals, navigating treacherous palace intrigues, and ultimately claiming the highest seat of power in the land. She wasn't just a figurehead, she ruled with authority, making crucial decisions that impacted China's future for generations to come. But what makes Wu Zetian's story even more captivating is the struggle and sacrifice behind her rise. From an imperial concubine to Empress consort, and eventually to emperor, her story is one of ambition, cunning, and political brilliance. How did she rise above the oppressive systems of her time? How did she manage to eliminate threats to her power and transform the Chinese empire? Join me as we uncover the remarkable path of Wu Zetian, the woman who changed the course of Chinese history forever. Before we dive in, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. We've got a fascinating journey ahead, and we'd love for you to be part of it. Also, drop a comment below. What do you think was Wu Zetian's most powerful move? Was it her rise to the throne, her clever political maneuvers, or her ability to outsmart her enemies? Let's discuss it. Your thoughts and insights are always welcome, and I'm curious to hear what you think about this legendary ruler's legacy. And don't forget, if you're new here, hit that notification bell so you never miss out on our deep dives into history's most intriguing figures. Now, grab a seat, because we're about to embark on a journey through time to uncover the secrets of Wu Zetian's rise to power. Set against the backdrop of the Tang Dynasty, one of China's most glorious periods, Wu Zetian rose from a humble concubine to become the emperor herself. In a world dominated by men, she redefined leadership, facing betrayals, political intrigue, and personal loss along the way. Her rise to power was not just about ambition, it was about survival in an unforgiving court. She outsmarted her rivals, manipulated the political landscape, and ultimately became one of the most significant rulers in Chinese history. But her journey was far from easy. Wu Zetian faced relentless opposition, not only from rival factions in the palace, but also from those who believed a woman could never sit on the throne of China. Despite these widespread prejudices, she proved that leadership was not defined by gender, but by vision, strategy, and determination. Her intelligence and political acumen became her greatest assets, allowing her to navigate a treacherous landscape filled with courtly conspiracies, deadly rivals, and even betrayal from those closest to her. Her reign was marked by sweeping reforms that shaped the future of the Tang Dynasty and the empire at large. She was not content with simply securing her throne. She sought to strengthen the very foundations of her empire. Wu Zetian took bold steps to reshape the bureaucracy, rewarding merit over birthright and bringing talented officials into her service, which helped to stabilize and strengthen the government. She also oversaw advancements in the arts and supported the flourishing of Buddhism, which became an integral part of Chinese society under her rule. Despite these achievements, her reign was often overshadowed by the controversies and the ruthless methods she employed to maintain power. Wu Zetian's political moves were calculated, and she wasn't afraid to eliminate anyone who posed a threat to her position. Her enemies often met untimely ends, and her rise to power involved a series of calculated alliances and betrayals. Yet, in the eyes of her supporters, she was a brilliant strategist, a ruler who knew how to play the dangerous game of court politics better than anyone else. What's truly fascinating about her rule is how she was able to turn the very tools of power, manipulation, alliances, and even ruthlessness into strengths. In an era where politics were a deadly game, Wu Zetian mastered the art of survival, ensuring that those who sought to undermine her would never have the chance to succeed. Her story is a testament to resilience, intelligence, and the ability to rise above the expectations of her time. Her legacy, complex and multifaceted, continues to stir debate and admiration even centuries later. She was not just a ruler. She was a force of nature, reshaping China in ways that would echo through history. Stay tuned as we uncover how Wu Zetian's rise wasn't just about power, but also about survival in a court full of ruthless rivals. In a time where betrayal was common and loyalty was often in short supply, Wu Zetian had to outthink, outmaneuver, and sometimes outlast her competitors at every turn. We'll explore how she cleverly manipulated the political landscape, played a dangerous game of alliances, and even rewrote the course of history to secure her place at the top. But it wasn't just her political genius that set her apart. It was her relentless ambition, her ability to adapt to shifting tides, and her unyielding desire to control her fate. Her story is one of resilience, strategy, and sheer willpower, where every move was calculated, and every action came with consequences. Wu Zetian's path to power was far from ordinary. This is a tale of a woman who refused to accept the limitations of her time and instead forged her own destiny. So, let's dive in and uncover how this extraordinary woman became the only female emperor of China. Let's get started. Chapter 1. The Early Years. Born to Power. Wu Zetian was born in 624 AD during the Tang Dynasty, a period marked by prosperity and cultural flourishing. Her family, while not of noble descent, was well respected, particularly her father, Wu Zetian, who held a position as a scholar and government official. Unlike many girls of her time, Wu Zetian was afforded a rare privilege, a formal education. From a young age, she was taught the classics, poetry, and Confucian philosophy, all of which cultivated her sharp mind and deep understanding of Chinese culture. Her father, recognizing her intellectual potential, took great care in nurturing her intellect. Zetian, he would say, knowledge is the most powerful weapon you can wield. Learn as much as you can, and remember, wisdom will always give you an advantage. In the quiet of their home, young Wu Zetian would listen intently, soaking in every lesson. "I will learn everything you teach me, father," she would reply, determined to excel. "I will not be like other women." Her childhood was one of privilege in terms of education, but she was also acutely aware of the limited opportunities available to women in a male-dominated society. Yet, she never allowed herself to be constrained by these boundaries. Wu Zetian knew she was different, not just in her thirst for knowledge, but in her understanding of power and how it worked. She understood that while women were often relegated to the shadows, there were other ways to make an impact. When Wu Zetian was 14, her life took a dramatic turn. Emperor Taizong, the reigning monarch of the Tang Dynasty, sent out an imperial edict calling for young women to join his court as concubines. Wu Zetian's beauty, intelligence, and potential did not go unnoticed, and her father, despite his initial hesitation, saw the opportunity for his daughter to rise in the ranks of power. It was a dangerous choice. Life in the palace was fraught with competition, and many concubines were never seen again after falling out of favor. But her father believed in her, and so he encouraged her to take the chance. Before she left, Wu Zetian sat with her, adjusting the robes she would wear to the palace. "Zetian," he said, his tone serious yet filled with care, "this is a rare opportunity, but it comes with great risks. You are entering a world where power is fleeting and competition is fierce. Do not forget everything I have taught you. Your mind is your weapon, and your patience will be your greatest strength." Wu Zetian, standing tall before him, nodded with determination. "I will not forget, father. I will not be just another face in the harem. I will make my presence known." Her father placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes reflecting both pride and concern. "The harem is full of powerful women and dangerous men. If you are to succeed, you must be as sharp as a blade and as patient as the river. Power is not given, it is taken." "I will make my way, father," she replied with quiet confidence. "I will not be a passive bystander in my own life." Wu Zetian entered the imperial palace as one of many concubines, her future uncertain. In the vast halls and luxurious chambers, she quickly realized how ruthless the competition was. The emperor had his favorites, and many women in the harem had already established their places. Wu Zetian, though young, saw an opportunity in the midst of the chaos. She understood that in this environment, beauty alone would not guarantee her survival. She needed to be more than that. She needed to be clever, observant, and strategic. As she quietly navigated the palace, she took careful note of how the court operated, the rivalries, the alliances, the subtle manipulations. In the silence of her rooms, she would whisper to herself, "I will not be forgotten. I will play this game, but I will play it my way. They will underestimate me, but that will be their mistake." Wu Zetian knew that if she was to make her mark, she had to be more than just a pretty face in the emperor's court. She had to outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast her competitors. This was the beginning of a journey that would see her rise from a humble concubine to one of the most powerful figures in Chinese history. Wu Zetian was born into a family that, though not of the highest noble rank, held a respected position within the Tang Dynasty. Her father, Wu Shihuo, was a scholar and an official, a man of intellect and influence who valued education above all else. From an early age, Wu Zetian was immersed in an environment where knowledge was cherished, and she was encouraged to study the classics, history, and philosophy. Unlike many girls of her time, who were expected to focus on household duties, Wu Zetian was granted the rare privilege of formal education. Her father believed deeply in the power of knowledge. He often told her, "Zetian, knowledge is the greatest weapon a person can possess. With it, you can change the course of history, reshape the future, but it will also make you a target, so you must be careful." Wu Zetian, listening intently, took these words to heart. She understood early on that knowledge could be both a tool for advancement and a source of danger, especially for a woman in a world where power was almost entirely controlled by men. "Father, I will learn everything you teach me," she would say, her voice filled with determination. "I will not be like the others. I will be more than just a woman in the background." Her father would smile, proud of her ambition, but he also knew that the road ahead would not be easy. "Remember, Zetian, the world is full of limitations, but it is those who know how to rise above them who shape history. Do not let anyone tell you what you cannot do." Wu Zetian spent her childhood absorbed in her studies. She read the works of Confucius and learned the intricacies of Chinese history, becoming familiar with the powerful figures who had shaped the empire. She also learned poetry, an art highly valued in Chinese culture, and developed a sharp mind for strategy and politics. Her father, seeing her potential, began to challenge her even more, pushing her to think critically about the world and the role of power. One evening, as they sat together in the study, her father handed her a scroll. "Read this," he said, "and tell me what you think." Wu Zetian carefully unrolled the scroll, her eyes scanning the words. "It speaks of the importance of loyalty, of the role the emperor plays in maintaining peace and order," she said thoughtfully, "but it also speaks of those who seek power through manipulation. I believe it means that those who truly understand the dynamics of power will survive, while those who rely solely on loyalty will be left behind." Her father nodded, impressed by her insight. "Exactly. Power is not just about loyalty. It is about knowing when to act, when to wait, and when to make your move. You must understand the rules of the game, and then decide when to play by them and when to break them." Wu Zetian absorbed these lessons eagerly. She was not like other girls who contentedly stayed within the traditional boundaries set for women. She was determined to learn how to navigate the world of politics, how to play the game of power. Her father's lessons went far beyond academics. They were about survival in a world that was brutal and unforgiving, especially for women. As she grew older, Wu Zetian understood that the court was not a place for the faint-hearted. It was a place where power could shift in an instant, and where rivals would stop at nothing to eliminate those they saw as threats. One day, when Wu Zetian was about 14, her life took an unexpected turn. The Emperor, Taizong, sent out an imperial edict calling for young women to be brought to the palace as concubines. Wu Zetian's beauty and intellect had already caught the attention of some of the court officials, and her father saw the opportunity as a chance for his daughter to rise in the imperial court. He was well aware of the dangers, but he knew that in a society where women had little power, such opportunities were rare. Before she left for the palace, her father sat her down one last time. "Zetian," he said quietly, "the palace is full of intrigue, rivalry, and danger. You must remember everything I have taught you. Do not let anyone see your weakness. Do not trust easily. Play the game, but never forget the rules." Wu Zetian, standing before him, her face determined, replied, "I understand, father. I will not forget what you've taught me. I will not let them control me." She could feel her heart racing with the mix of excitement and fear, but she knew that this was the path she had to take. She had spent years preparing for this moment, and now she was ready to enter the world of power and politics. "Good," her father said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Just remember, no one who seeks power can afford to be naive. The harem is filled with women who will try to rise above the others. You must be sharper, more strategic than they are. Power is not given, it is taken." Wu Zetian nodded, her mind already beginning to calculate the steps she would need to take. She knew that her entry into the emperor's court was not just an opportunity to serve, but a chance to make her mark, to begin the journey that would ultimately lead her to the throne. As she left for the palace, Wu Zetian couldn't help but think back to the lessons her father had taught her. She was ready to navigate the treacherous waters of court life, knowing that in the end, it wasn't beauty or favor that would decide her fate. It was her mind, her ability to outsmart, outlast, and outmaneuver all who stood in her way. The early Tang Dynasty was a time of great prosperity and cultural flourishing, yet it was also a period of intense political struggle and shifting power dynamics. The dynasty, founded in 618 AD by Emperor Gaozu, had rapidly expanded its territory, bringing the empire to its golden age. The early years were marked by territorial conquests, consolidation of power, and the creation of a complex bureaucratic system. The central government held strong control over the empire, but the imperial court was a hotbed of intrigue, rivalries, and factionalism, where power was often gained or lost in a single move. Wu Zetian's early life unfolded against this dynamic backdrop. In the bustling capital city of Chang'an, the center of both political and cultural life, her family found themselves among the educated elite, but they were still far from the highest echelons of power. The Tang court was known for its grandeur and cultural achievements, but beneath the surface, it was a place where power was fragile, and political survival depended on wit, cunning, and strategic alliances. Wu Zetian's father, Wu Shihuo, was a scholar and an official, a man who understood the complexities of court politics and the importance of education. He often spoke to his daughter about the harsh realities of the world she was about to enter. Zetian, he would say, "You will see that the court is not just a place of ceremony and ritual. It is a place where every word you speak and every gesture you make is scrutinized. You will have to navigate the web of alliances and rivalries that exist here, or else you will find yourself lost in the shadows." "Father," Wu Zetian would reply, her voice steady, "I understand. I will not be like the others. I will learn how to make my way in this world." Wu Shihuo was not only concerned about his daughter's education, but also about the dangers she would face. In the Tang Dynasty, political power often depended on one's ability to navigate the treacherous world of the imperial court. Men, and increasingly women, sought power by forming alliances, often with dangerous consequences. Rivalries ran deep, and betrayal was a constant threat. Those who failed to protect themselves, or who were seen as too weak, would quickly be discarded by the system. "There is one rule you must never forget, Zetian," he would tell her. "In the court, only the strongest survive. And strength is not always measured by your position, but by your ability to read the political landscape and know when to act." As Wu Zetian prepared for her role in the palace, she saw firsthand the complexities of the Tang court. Her father would take her to court functions, where she would observe the interactions of officials and nobles. She began to notice how words could be weapons, and how power could shift with the slightest change in allegiance. One day, at a gathering, she overheard two officials discussing the emperor's recent decision to appoint a new general. "The emperor's choices are always interesting," one of them remarked. "But the real power lies in the people behind the throne. They make the decisions, not him." Wu Zetian, standing just out of sight, took mental notes. She had always been observant, and she understood that in this world, power wasn't just about direct authority. It was about who controlled the flow of information and who had the ear of the emperor. That afternoon, as her father led her back to their residence, she spoke thoughtfully. "Father, they say that real power is in the hands of the courtiers, not the emperor himself. Do you believe that?" Wu Shihuo nodded gravely. "In many ways, yes. The emperor is the figurehead, the symbol of unity. But those who have the trust of the emperor, those who are closest to him, are the ones who shape the decisions. This is a world of influence and manipulation, and it is in the shadows of power where the true rulers often dwell. If you want to survive here, you must learn how to move unseen and make your presence known without appearing to do so." It was not long before Wu Zetian realized that to navigate the Tang court, she would have to rely on more than just intellect. She had to understand the intricate web of relationships, the secret alliances, and the underlying motivations of those around her. The emperor, though powerful, was only one part of the political landscape. His court was filled with ambitious men and women, each vying for influence, and many were willing to do whatever it took to gain favor or eliminate their rivals. One day, as Wu Zetian walked through the palace gardens with her father, she asked him a question that had been on her mind. "Father, How do we know who to trust in this world? Everyone seems to be playing their own game. Wu Shihuo paused, considering his daughter's question. Trust is a rare commodity in the palace. People will speak with honeyed words, but their true intentions are often hidden. You must learn to watch their actions, not just listen to their words. In this world, people will betray you if it suits them, but they will also help you if it benefits them. You must learn to use others as they use you, always keeping your eyes open and your plans close to your chest. Wu Zetian listened carefully, absorbing the wisdom her father offered. She knew that the road ahead would be treacherous, but she was ready. She understood now that the world she was entering wasn't just one of power, it was one of constant negotiation, manipulation, and survival. In the Tang Dynasty, the court was a place where only the cleverest and most adaptable could succeed. Wu Zetian, though young, was already beginning to see how she could use the skills her father had taught her to navigate the complex web of politics that defined the early years of the Tang Dynasty. "Father, I will learn how to play the game," she said with quiet confidence, "and I will win." Chapter 2. The Emperor's Concubine. At the age of 14, Wu Zetian's life took a significant turn when she was chosen to join the imperial harem of Emperor Taizong, the second emperor of the Tang Dynasty. The decision to enter the emperor's court was one filled with risk, yet it was an opportunity that could not be ignored. Her father, Wu Shihuo, saw the potential it offered but was deeply aware of the dangers that came with it. As a concubine of the emperor, Wu Zetian would be exposed to the most powerful court in the land, but the competition would be fierce, and only the most cunning and politically savvy would rise to prominence. The emperor's harem was a complex and competitive environment. Hundreds of women, all vying for the emperor's favor, filled the palace, and while many were chosen for their beauty, few gained real power. Wu Zetian, however, was different. Though she was young, her sharp mind, her wit, and her beauty made her stand out among the many women vying for a place in the emperor's eyes. Yet, she knew that her survival in the harem would not be determined by her beauty alone. It would be her intelligence, her ability to read the political landscape, and her capacity to maneuver through the palace intrigues that would determine her future. Before she left for the palace, her father gave her one last piece of advice. "Zetian," he said, his voice low and serious, "the harem is a dangerous place. It is not enough to be beautiful. You must learn to use your mind, to understand the politics of the court, and to make allies where you can. There are women in the palace who would do anything to remove you if they see you as a threat. So be careful." Wu Zetian, standing in front of him, nodded solemnly. "I understand, father. I will not let myself be overlooked. I will use everything I have to rise." Her father looked at her with a mixture of pride and concern. "Remember, you are not just a concubine. You are a player in a much larger game. Always be aware of what is happening around you, and never let anyone see your true intentions. The emperor may be the most powerful man in the empire, but the real power lies in the shadows of the court, in the hands of those who control the emperor's ear." With that, Wu Zetian left for the palace. Her journey was long and filled with uncertainty, but as she entered the grand halls of the imperial palace, she couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. The palace was magnificent, filled with golden walls, intricate tapestries, and endless courtyards. Yet, beneath the opulence lay a world of hidden dangers. Upon her arrival, Wu Zetian was introduced to the emperor's many concubines, each of whom held a different position in the harem. Some were merely favored for their beauty, while others had earned the emperor's trust and had power within the court. Wu Zetian quickly observed the delicate balance of relationships among the women. Some were kind, while others were fierce competitors, watching her every move. One afternoon, as Wu Zetian was walking through the garden, an older concubine named Consort Wu, one of the emperor's favorites, approached her with a knowing smile. "You must be new here," Consort Wu said, studying her carefully. "The emperor is wise to bring in young, intelligent women like yourself. But let me give you a piece of advice. Do not trust anyone here. Not even the emperor's closest allies. Everyone has an agenda." Wu Zetian, who had been trained to be observant, looked the older woman in the eye. "I understand," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "I will keep my wits about me." Consort Wu nodded approvingly. "Good. In this place, the most dangerous enemy is not the emperor's other women. It is the unseen forces, those who pull the strings behind the scenes." As Wu Zetian spent more time in the harem, she learned quickly how to navigate the complex relationships within the palace. She began to understand the dynamics between the emperor's various concubines and the political factions that influenced the decisions of the court. While she was not the emperor's favorite, at least not yet, she was determined to rise above the others. She observed how the emperor's closest confidants, like his advisors and generals, would interact with the women in the harem. Some were more direct in their favoring, while others were more subtle, offering small gestures of kindness or encouragement to those they favored. Wu Zetian knew that if she was to survive and rise to power, she would have to learn how to earn the favor of the emperor while also securing her own alliances. One evening, as she sat in her chamber, Wu Zetian reflected on her position. She was not yet a figure of power in the court, but she knew she could not wait idly for the emperor to notice her. "I must make my own opportunities," she thought to herself. "I must show the emperor and the court that I am someone worth watching." The next day, during a gathering at the palace, Wu Zetian decided to act. She made sure to speak with a few of the emperor's advisors, impressing them with her knowledge of the empire and her insights into the politics of the time. She was careful not to be overly ambitious, instead allowing them to come to their own conclusions about her intellect and potential. She did not need to force her way to the top. She knew that a well-placed comment, a subtle act of cleverness, could be just as effective. Soon after, Emperor Taizong took notice of Wu Zetian. At first, it was her sharp mind and her ability to engage in meaningful conversations with him that intrigued him. Unlike other concubines, who spoke only of beauty and personal charm, Wu Zetian was able to discuss matters of state, military strategy, and the empire's future. She did not simply try to please the emperor with her appearance. She sought to challenge him intellectually, to show him that she was more than just a beautiful face in his harem. One evening, as the emperor sat in his private chambers, he asked her, "What do you think of the current state of our empire, Zetian?" Wu Zetian, composed and thoughtful, replied, "Your Majesty, the empire is vast and prosperous, but there are cracks beneath the surface. The military is strong, yet there is a growing unrest in the provinces. If we are to maintain our power, we must be careful not to alienate the people or the generals. The emperor raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her insight. You speak wisely, Zetian. You are more than just a pretty face in the harem. You may have a future here. It was this moment that marked the beginning of Wu Zetian's rise. She had caught the emperor's attention, but she knew this was only the first step. Now, in the dangerous world of the imperial harem, the real challenge was just beginning. She would need to outsmart her rivals, gain more influence, and position herself strategically within the palace, always staying one step ahead of those who sought to tear her down. Wu Zetian's relationship with Emperor Taizong began like most others in the imperial harem, distant and impersonal. At first, she was just one of many concubines in the emperor's vast harem, but her intelligence, beauty, and charisma soon set her apart. Although she was not immediately favored over other women, Wu Zetian understood the importance of patience and strategy. She knew that the emperor, a powerful and wise ruler, would not easily be swayed by superficial beauty alone. To rise above the others, she would need to make herself indispensable, not just to him, but to the court as a whole. In the beginning, Wu Zetian quietly observed the emperor, noting how he interacted with his other concubines and how the court functioned under his rule. She noticed that Taizong, while admired for his strength and wisdom, was surrounded by people who often sought to manipulate him. His advisors, generals, and even some of his closest allies appeared to seek more power at the emperor's expense. Yet it was clear that Taizong was a ruler of great insight, who valued intellect and strategy above all else. One evening, when the emperor summoned her to his private chambers for the first time, Wu Zetian was both nervous and determined. She entered the room with grace, her mind racing with thoughts of what to say. Taizong, seated on a grand chair, looked at her with curiosity, his sharp eyes studying her every move. He gestured for her to sit beside him. "Zetian," he said, his voice deep and measured, "I have heard that you are more than just another beautiful face in the harem. Tell me, what is your opinion on the state of the empire?" Wu Zetian, who had been preparing for this moment since she arrived at the palace, met his gaze with confidence. "Your Majesty, the empire is strong, but there are challenges ahead. While the military is powerful, I believe that the provincial unrest is an issue that cannot be ignored. If we do not act, there may be trouble in the coming years. The people need more than just military strength. They need a ruler who understands their concerns." Taizong, intrigued by her boldness, raised an eyebrow. "You speak with the wisdom of someone much older. How is it that a young woman like yourself has such a sharp understanding of state affairs?" Wu Zetian remained composed, understanding that this was her moment to impress him. "I have been raised to believe that knowledge is the foundation of power. While others may focus on beauty or favor, I know that true influence comes from understanding the needs of the people and the inner workings of the court." The emperor, surprised by her insight, leaned back in his chair. "You are different from the others, Zetian. You do not seek to win my favor with flattery or charm, but with your intellect. That is rare." Wu Zetian, sensing an opportunity, spoke again. "I do not seek to please you, Your Majesty, but I do wish to serve you in a way that will help the empire thrive." Taizong regarded her for a long moment, clearly impressed. "I will keep an eye on you, Zetian. You may prove to be more valuable than I first thought." From that moment on, Wu Zetian's position in the harem began to shift. She was no longer just a face in the crowd. She had made an impression on the emperor, one that set her apart from the other women. However, her initial struggles were far from over. While she had earned the emperor's attention, the competition for his favor was fierce, and the other concubines quickly took notice of her growing influence. One of the first to challenge Wu Zetian was Consort Wang, a woman who had been a favorite of the emperor for many years. Consort Wang had seen how the emperor had begun to favor Wu Zetian, and she was not pleased. One evening, as Wu Zetian was passing through the palace halls, Consort Wang approached her, her face hard with disdain. "You think you can win the emperor's favor with your clever words, do you?" Consort Wang asked coldly. "The emperor is a man of strength and honor, not a fool to be swayed by the likes of you." Wu Zetian, who had already learned the importance of controlling her emotions, responded calmly, "I seek no favor, Consort Wang, but to serve the emperor and the empire. I believe my mind, rather than my beauty, will prove more useful to him." Consort Wang sneered. "You may have the emperor's ear for now, but remember this. I have been by his side for many years. You may have a sharp tongue, but the emperor's heart belongs to those who have earned it over time." Wu Zetian did not respond to the taunt. Instead, she walked past Consort Wang with grace, her mind already formulating how she would deal with this new rivalry. She understood that in the imperial court, alliances shifted like sand, and she could not afford to alienate anyone, especially someone as influential as Consort Wang. But she also knew that patience and strategy would ultimately win the day. Despite the challenges, Wu Zetian continued to rise. She found herself engaging more with the emperor, discussing matters of state, military strategy, and even philosophy. Her intellect captivated Taizong, and over time he began to rely on her advice. One day, as the emperor sat with her in the palace garden, he asked, "Zetian, you have proven yourself to be more than just a concubine. What is it that you want from me?" Wu Zetian, always careful with her words, replied, "Your Majesty, I do not seek anything for myself. I only wish to serve you in a way that will strengthen the empire. I want to help ensure that your reign is remembered as one of wisdom and prosperity." Taizong looked at her thoughtfully, his eyes narrowing. "You speak as though you have a vision for the future of the empire. What do you see, Zetian?" Wu Zetian took a deep breath, knowing that this was a pivotal moment. "I see an empire where merit, not birthright, is the measure of a person's worth. I see a world where power is wielded by those who are capable, not by those who happen to be born into privilege. If we want to ensure the future of the Tang Dynasty, we must look beyond the traditional structures and invest in the potential of those who can truly serve the empire." The emperor's eyes gleamed with interest. "You are a woman of great ambition, Zetian. I will remember your words." In the weeks that followed, Wu Zetian continued to make her presence known. Her influence within the court grew, but so did the rivalries. While the emperor respected her intellect, the other concubines, including Consort Wang, saw her as a threat and began to plot against her. Yet, Wu Zetian remained patient. She understood that true power came not from winning a battle in a single moment, but from carefully playing the long game. Wu Zetian's intelligence and charm were the qualities that first caught the attention of Emperor Taizong, setting her apart from the other women in the imperial harem. Unlike many concubines who relied solely on their beauty or physical appeal, Wu Zetian understood early on that to rise in the ranks of the palace, she would need to offer something more. While beauty was certainly an asset, it was her sharp mind and ability to engage the emperor in meaningful conversation that made her truly unique. It didn't take long for Wu Zetian to realize that the emperor, although known for his wisdom and military strength, was a man who valued intellectual conversation and sharp insights. She began to seek out opportunities to speak with him, often using the court's gatherings as a backdrop for casual yet impactful discussions. She was careful not to come across as overly ambitious, but rather as someone genuinely interested in the well-being of the empire and the challenges facing the emperor. One day, after a formal banquet where several officials had spoken about the empire's growing military needs, Wu Zetian approached the emperor, who was seated near a small group of advisors. She bowed gracefully, then stood silently for a moment, as if considering whether or not to speak. Taizong, noticing her hesitation, motioned for her to approach. "Zetian," he said with a slight smile, "you have something to say, don't you? You do not strike me as someone who is content with silence." Wu Zetian took a deep breath and with measured confidence replied, "Your Majesty, while the military is important, I believe there is another issue that requires your attention. The provinces are growing restive, and the people are beginning to feel the weight of the empire's demands. The military cannot quell dissatisfaction forever. If the people lose their faith in the central government, even the strongest army may not be enough to hold the empire together." Taizong, intrigued, raised an eyebrow. "You speak as though you understand the hearts of the people, Zetian. Tell me, how would you suggest we address this issue?" Wu Zetian's mind raced. She knew this was her chance to truly engage him. "Perhaps, Your Majesty, it is time to invest more in the local governance. The people need to feel that their voices matter, that they are not simply subjects of an empire but participants in its growth. If we give the provincial leaders more autonomy and create a system where merit is rewarded rather than birthright, we might prevent unrest before it begins." The emperor leaned forward slightly, clearly impressed by her insight. "You speak of meritocracy, something we have not fully embraced. You would have me empower those outside the capital, those far from the emperor's gaze." Wu Zetian nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty. By recognizing the talents of those in the provinces and allowing them to contribute to the empire's success, we would create a stronger, more unified China. The people need to know that their leaders are capable, not simply born into power." Taizong studied her for a moment, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "You have a way of seeing the empire in a manner few others do. It is not just intelligence you possess, Zetian. It is wisdom beyond your years." From that moment forward, Taizong's interest in Wu Zetian deepened. He began to seek her out for advice on various matters, not just political, but also philosophical. He admired her ability to think critically, her capacity to assess a situation and offer solutions that went beyond surface-level fixes. In the midst of the chaotic politics of the court, Wu Zetian stood out as someone who was not afraid to speak her mind, especially when it came to matters of the empire's future. One day, while discussing a report from one of the military generals, Taizong looked at her with a glint of curiosity. "Zetian, I have heard many opinions on this matter, but yours is the most compelling. What do you think we should do about the unrest along the northern border?" Wu Zetian, accustomed to being underestimated by her peers in the harem, met the emperor's gaze with unwavering certainty. "Your Majesty, while we must certainly maintain military strength along the borders, we must also consider the underlying causes of the unrest. If the people feel neglected or oppressed, they will never accept our rule, no matter how many soldiers we send. Perhaps it is time to increase the flow of trade, provide better support for local leaders, and ensure that their voices are heard in the imperial court." Taizong, leaning back in his chair, looked at her in silent contemplation. "Your ideas are always well thought out, Zetian. I would be remiss not to take them seriously." His tone had softened, and there was a quiet respect in his words. As the days passed, the emperor began to confide more in Wu Zetian. He appreciated that she did not seek to flatter him or tell him what he wanted to hear. Her intelligence and directness had earned her a place in his inner circle, and soon she became one of the few women in the palace whom he trusted to offer him honest counsel. While other concubines vied for his attention with their beauty or charm, Wu Zetian's approach was far subtler and far more enduring. One evening, as the emperor walked through the palace gardens, Wu Zetian walked beside him, engaged in conversation about a recent decision regarding military reinforcements. As they talked, the air between them shifted. The emperor, who had always maintained a certain distance from his concubines, now seemed to regard her differently. "Zetian," he said as they paused by a small pond, "you have an uncanny way of seeing things as they are, not as they appear. You understand more about leadership than most of the men I have in my council." Wu Zetian smiled softly, bowing her head in acknowledgement. "Your Majesty, I am simply a student of history. The greatest rulers were always those who understood the pulse of the people. That is the only way to ensure the empire's strength." The emperor studied her, his expression unreadable. "I think you may be right. Perhaps we will have more conversations like this in the future." From that moment on, Wu Zetian became a trusted advisor to Emperor Taizong. Her intelligence and charm had caught his attention, but it was her wisdom and strategic thinking that made her indispensable to him. She had quickly risen in the ranks of the imperial court, not through the typical means of flattery or beauty, but through the power of her mind and her ability to engage the emperor in ways few others could. This would be the foundation of her eventual rise to even greater power within the palace, as she continued to navigate the complex and often treacherous world of the Tang court. Chapter 13. A Widow's Ambition. The sudden death of Emperor Taizong in 649 AD marked the end of an era in the Tang Dynasty, but it also set in motion the most pivotal chapter of Wu Zetian's life. For Wu Zetian, the death of the emperor was not just a personal loss. It was a political shift that opened new doors and new challenges. having already established herself as a trusted confidant of Taizong. Wu Zetian now faced a new dynamic under the reign of his son, Emperor Gaozong. The transition from one emperor to the next was never seamless, especially when the new ruler was younger and less experienced than his father. Emperor Gaozong, who ascended the throne after Taizong's death, was a man of good intentions but was not as capable or as commanding as his father. He was known for his indecisiveness and reliance on others for counsel, and in many ways, this created an environment in which Wu Zetian could begin to maneuver more freely. Wu Zetian's relationship with Gaozong began as one of cautious respect. Despite being a widow, Wu Zetian was still part of the imperial court, and her role had not diminished. She had in fact grown even closer to Gaozong, and it became apparent that he valued her intellect and counsel. Unlike his father, who had often kept Wu Zetian at arm's length in favor of his other concubines, Gaozong showed an openness to her advice, though his dependence on her soon became more complicated than either had anticipated. One evening, after the court had settled into its usual post-banquet routine, Emperor Gaozong summoned Wu Zetian to his private chambers. She entered, dressed in her finest robes, her face serene but her mind alert. She had learned long ago that the palace was a place of intrigue, where the slightest shift in favor could mean the difference between power and ruin. As she entered, Gaozong was sitting by a large window, gazing out at the distant mountains. He turned to her as she approached. "Zetian," he said quietly, "you were close to my father. You knew him better than anyone else. I need your guidance. The court is restless, and I feel as though I am not in control." Wu Zetian studied him carefully, seeing the vulnerability in his expression. She had always known that Gaozong lacked his father's strength, but this moment of self-doubt laid bare his insecurities. Still, she understood that this was an opportunity for her to solidify her position. "Your Majesty," she replied softly, "I have always believed that a ruler's strength lies not in his ability to command with force, but in his capacity to inspire loyalty and trust. The court is indeed restless, but it is not too late to win their confidence." Gaozong sighed heavily and sat back in his chair. "But how? My father's death has thrown everything into chaos. I have so many advisors, yet no one truly understands the people like my father did. How can I possibly fill his shoes?" Wu Zetian approached him slowly, standing by the window and looking out at the same distant mountains he had been staring at earlier. "Your Majesty," she began, her voice calm yet purposeful, "you do not need to fill your father's shoes. You need to carve your own path. But to do so, you must make your own decisions and surround yourself with those who are loyal to you, not just because of their allegiance to your father, but because of your own merit." Gaozong's eyes widened slightly, clearly absorbing her words. "But how can I trust those around me? Many of them were loyal to my father, not to me." Wu Zetian turned to him, her expression one of understanding mixed with an underlying cunning. "That is where you must be careful, Your Majesty. Power is not just about loyalty, it is about control. Control the flow of information. Control who rises and falls in the court, and control who has access to you. Only then can you ensure that your reign remains secure." For the first time since his father's death, Gaozong looked at her with a renewed sense of trust. You truly understand how this court works, don't you? Wu Zetian nodded, her voice steady. I have lived here long enough to understand that loyalty is fleeting and that power is always shifting. But it can be controlled, and it can be harnessed if one is clever enough. As the conversation continued, Wu Zetian carefully planted the seeds for her own future within the court. She did not make any overt claims to power, but she subtly positioned herself as a critical player in Gaozong's reign. She understood that with his reliance on her counsel, she could eventually guide him to make decisions that would benefit her own ambitions. She also recognized that her influence over him was growing, and it wouldn't be long before she was the most trusted advisor in his court. In the days that followed, Wu Zetian continued to work closely with the new emperor, offering him guidance on matters of state and diplomacy. Her intelligence and insight became invaluable to Gaozong, and his dependency on her deepened. Yet, this relationship was not without complications. Despite his growing respect for Wu Zetian, Gaozong was also influenced by other concubines who were eager to win his favor. Among them was the powerful consort Wang, who had long been a rival to Wu Zetian. Consort Wang saw Wu Zetian's growing influence as a threat and began to plot against her. One day, as Wu Zetian entered the court, she overheard a conversation between two of Gaozong's closest advisors. They were discussing the delicate balance of power in the harem and the court, and one of them mentioned Wu Zetian by name. She is becoming too influential, the advisor said. The emperor listens to her more than he listens to anyone else. Wu Zetian, who had been listening from behind a screen, stepped forward, her presence immediately commanding attention. If the emperor values my counsel, it is because I offer him the truth, she said, her voice calm but firm. And if I am a threat to anyone, it is not to the emperor's court, but to those who seek to undermine his rule. Her words were measured, but they struck at the heart of the power struggle in the court. Wu Zetian knew that her rise would not be without resistance, but she was prepared for it. She had spent years studying the art of survival in the imperial harem, and now, with the death of Emperor Taizong and the ascendancy of Gaozong, she knew that the moment for her own ambitions was fast approaching. In the wake of these conversations, Wu Zetian's influence over the emperor continued to grow. Her intelligence, combined with the trust Gaozong had placed in her, made her one of the most powerful figures in the court. Yet, she knew that this power was fragile, and that she would need to navigate the increasingly dangerous waters of the court carefully. As her influence grew, so did the envy and resentment of those who saw her as a threat. The delicate balance between loyalty and ambition, between trust and manipulation, would shape the course of Wu Zetian's future in the Tang court and, eventually, her rise to power that would change the course of Chinese history forever. As the years passed under Emperor Gaozong's reign, Wu Zetian's position in the imperial court began to evolve. No longer content with merely being one of the many concubines in the emperor's harem, she began to recognize that her influence in the court could be much greater. While Emperor Taizong, Gaozong's father, had always been wary of Wu Zetian's ambition, the new emperor was more malleable and indecisive, which gave her an opportunity to step into a more politically active role. Wu Zetian knew that for her ambitions to succeed, She had to gain more control, not just over Gaozong, but over the court itself. Her intellect had always been her greatest asset, and she quickly realized that her ability to think strategically and her deep understanding of court politics would be key to her rise. She also knew that the court was filled with rivalries, and that to win the emperor's favor, she would need to navigate these rivalries with skill and precision. One evening, as Wu Zetian sat alone in her private quarters, she reflected on her journey. Her rise had been slow but steady. She had earned Gaozong's trust, and he now regularly sought her advice. But she was aware that her current position, though influential, was still limited by the fact that she was only a concubine. The title and position of Empress, which had been held by another woman in the harem, was still a step beyond her reach. One night, Gaozong summoned Wu Zetian to his chambers. She entered the room, her steps graceful and deliberate, her thoughts sharp as ever. Gaozong, sitting by the window and looking out into the moonlit night, turned to her as she entered. His expression was thoughtful, perhaps even weary, as if the burden of the throne weighed heavily on him. "Zetian," he began, his voice laced with the fatigue of ruling, "I often find myself torn between the advice I receive from my officials and from the women in the harem. Many of them speak to me of loyalty and family, but I find that their words often seem empty, even self-serving." Wu Zetian, ever attentive, stepped closer, her voice calm and measured. "Your Majesty, loyalty is indeed a rare commodity in the court, but it must be cultivated with trust. Those who are truly loyal to you will not speak in whispers or plot behind your back. They will speak plainly and honestly. The question is not whether they are loyal, but whether they can be trusted to act in the empire's best interest." Gaozong nodded slowly, impressed by her clarity. "You speak with the wisdom of a seasoned advisor, Zetian. I have grown to trust your judgment more than that of many of my ministers. But still, I wonder, how do I know who is truly loyal and who is merely seeking their own gain?" Wu Zetian paused for a moment, considering the question carefully. "Loyalty is not shown in words, Your Majesty, but in actions. Look at who stands by you when you are most vulnerable, who offers counsel when it is needed most, and who seeks to challenge you when it is difficult. Those who serve you honestly do not fear to speak the truth, even when it is uncomfortable." Gaozong gazed at her, his eyes narrowing slightly as he processed her words. "I see. You have always been more perceptive than most in this court. Perhaps I have underestimated your ability to understand the true nature of those around me." Wu Zetian smiled softly, her gaze never leaving his. "Your Majesty, I have spent years observing the court, learning the language of power and politics. The key is not to trust others blindly, but to make sure that your decisions are your own and not swayed by those who wish to manipulate you." It was in these private moments, these subtle conversations, that Wu Zetian began to transform her role from that of a concubine into a trusted advisor and confidant to the emperor. She did not seek to overpower him, but rather to help him see the complexities of the court with clearer eyes. Her words were carefully chosen, not to dominate, but to guide him toward the decisions that would ultimately benefit her, though, at the time, she remained content to be in the background, offering her counsel quietly. However, as Wu Zetian's influence grew, so did the tensions within the harem. Other concubines, particularly the Empress, who had once been Gaozong's favored consort, began to view her as a threat. Empress Wang, a woman who had been in the emperor's life long before Wu Zetian, had grown accustomed to holding the highest position in the court. She had seen Wu Zetian's rise with increasing unease and began to subtly undermine her influence. One day, as Wu Zetian was walking through the palace corridors, Empress Wang intercepted her. With a polite but cold smile, she spoke, "Zetian, I have noticed how often the emperor seeks your advice. It is rare for a concubine to have such sway over the emperor's decisions. Be careful, for the path to power is fraught with dangers. You may think you have his favor, but it can be easily lost." Wu Zetian, always composed, returned the smile. "Your Majesty, I serve the emperor as best I can. My only interest is in the well-being of the empire." Empress Wang's smile did not falter, but there was a coldness to it now. "Of course, but you must remember, the emperor's heart belongs to those who have proven their loyalty through years of service, not to those who seek to rise above their station." Wu Zetian did not respond immediately, but instead, she took a moment to observe Empress Wang's expression. She could see the subtle signs of insecurity behind the veneer of politeness. "Your Majesty," Wu Zetian finally said, her voice smooth, "I believe the emperor values loyalty in all its forms. I am merely trying to help him make decisions that will ensure the stability and prosperity of the empire." Empress Wang narrowed her eyes slightly, but did not respond further, and the two parted ways. Yet, in the depths of the palace, Wu Zetian knew that this was only the beginning. Empress Wang was a powerful adversary, but Wu Zetian had learned that the key to survival in the palace was not to fight every battle, but to pick the right ones and win them decisively. In the months that followed, Wu Zetian continued to assert herself more in the political affairs of the court. She was not content with simply being a passive observer, and her influence over the emperor grew. She began to challenge him, not in public, but privately, offering alternative views on important matters of state. Her subtle manipulation of court affairs did not go unnoticed, but she had become skilled in remaining in the background, making her influence felt without ever appearing to be a threat. Emperor Gaozong, still young and lacking his father's decisiveness, increasingly relied on Wu Zetian's counsel. He often turned to her when faced with difficult decisions, seeking her guidance on military strategy, diplomacy, and governance. She had become not just a concubine, but a powerful political force in her own right, one that would shape the future of the Tang Dynasty in ways no one could have predicted. Chapter 4. The Empress Dowager. As Emperor Gaozong's reign continued, Wu Zetian's influence over the imperial court only grew stronger. With each passing day, her role in advising the emperor on matters of state became more critical, and it wasn't long before others in the court began to notice her increasing prominence. While her relationship with the emperor had begun as one of a simple concubine, it was becoming clear that she was not content with merely occupying a secondary position in the harem. She wanted more, not just power, but recognition. She wanted to secure her place in the history of the Tang Dynasty, not as a mere concubine, but as an empress, a true partner to the emperor. Despite her rising influence, Wu Zetian faced the formidable presence of Empress Wang, the official consort of Emperor Gaozong. Empress Wang had long been established in the court and enjoyed the status of being the emperor's primary wife. Wu Zetian knew that she would have to tread carefully. Empress Wang was not someone who would relinquish her position without a fight, and in the highly competitive world of the imperial harem, there was no room for error. Wu Zetian's strategy was not to challenge the Empress directly, but to outmaneuver her quietly, using her intelligence and cunning to gain an upper hand. One afternoon, as Wu Zetian walked through the imperial gardens, she overheard a conversation between two of Empress Wang's closest confidantes. They were discussing the upcoming festival, where the emperor would choose which concubine he favored the most. Wu Zetian's ears perked up as she listened, knowing that this was a key moment where she could assert herself without stepping on anyone's toes. She turned a corner and casually approached the two women. "Your conversation sounds interesting," she said, her voice calm and measured as she approached them with a friendly smile. "I'm curious. What do you think the emperor will decide this time?" The two women froze, caught off guard by her unexpected appearance. They exchanged wary glances before one of them spoke. "The emperor has always favored Empress Wang, as you well know. She is the mother of his heirs and the symbol of his power." Wu Zetian smiled, her expression serene but her eyes sharp. "Of course. But perhaps the emperor will also consider loyalty in a different light this time. Loyalty to the empire, not just to those who have been by his side from the beginning." The two women glanced at each other, clearly unsure of how to respond. Wu Zetian had a way of speaking that made others uncertain whether she was subtly criticizing the current order or simply stating a fact. She knew this, and she used it to her advantage. "It's a pity that the emperor cannot see the full potential of his other concubines. Some, like me, have so much more to offer than simple beauty. I would hope he recognizes that," she added, her voice soft but cutting. The women, sensing the challenge in her words, nodded politely but did not engage further. Wu Zetian had already planted a seed, one that would begin to grow as the court watched her more closely. She had skillfully shifted the conversation, making it clear that while Empress Wang might be his wife, she, Wu Zetian, was a force to be reckoned with. In the weeks that followed, Wu Zetian continued to maneuver within the court, using her influence over the emperor to slowly edge out Empress Wang's favor. At court gatherings, she would engage the emperor in thoughtful conversation, discussing matters of governance and philosophy. She never pressed him for favors, never openly competed with the empress. Instead, she simply presented herself as the emperor's equal, offering insights and wisdom that he found increasingly invaluable. One evening, as they sat together in the emperor's private chambers, the conversation turned to the affairs of the state. Gaozong, exhausted from a long day of court duties, looked to Wu Zetian with weary eyes. "Zetian," he said softly, "I have always trusted your judgment. You are the one I turn to when I need clarity. But now, I must ask, what do you think of my marriage to Empress Wang?" Wu Zetian, who had carefully cultivated her image as a wise and loyal concubine, did not hesitate. "Your Majesty," she said, her tone gentle yet filled with unspoken authority, "I have always believed that the true strength of a ruler lies in his ability to choose those who will support him in his greatest endeavors. Empress Wang is certainly devoted, but she is also a reminder of the past. If you wish to build the future, you must surround yourself with those who understand the needs of the empire today, not just the traditions of the past. Gaozong looked at her, his expression thoughtful. You speak of the future, Zetian, but how can I be certain that I am making the right choice? Wu Zetian leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking with his. Your Majesty, the future belongs to those who act decisively. Empress Wang has served her purpose, but her time has passed. You have the opportunity to shape the empire as you see fit. And for that, you need a consort who understands your vision and your challenges. Gaozong's gaze softened, and for a moment, it seemed as though he was lost in thought. Wu Zetian knew this was her moment. She had subtly pushed him to question his loyalty to Empress Wang, all while making it seem like a matter of statecraft. Perhaps you are right, he murmured, almost to himself. The next day, to the shock of the court, Emperor Gaozong announced that he was demoting Empress Wang from her position as Empress Consort. In her place, he elevated Wu Zetian to the title of Empress Consort. The move was both politically charged and deeply symbolic, signaling a shift in the balance of power within the imperial court. Wu Zetian's rise to Empress Consort was not just a personal victory. It was a strategic move that reshaped the future of the Tang Dynasty. By carefully managing her relationship with Gaozong and outmaneuvering her rivals in the court, she had secured the highest possible position a woman could hold in the empire. Yet, even as she ascended to power, she knew that her true challenge had only just begun. Empress Wang's supporters would not go quietly, and there were many in the court who still saw Wu Zetian as an upstart, an outsider. But she was no longer just a concubine. She was Empress Consort, and she had every intention of wielding her newfound power to its fullest extent. After Emperor Gaozong fell seriously ill, the delicate balance of power in the Tang Dynasty's imperial court shifted dramatically. His health had deteriorated quickly, and he was no longer able to govern with the same vigor as he had before. Wu Zetian, who had already been exercising significant influence behind the scenes, now found herself in a position to fully assert her control over the empire's affairs. Gaozong's incapacity meant that the real power would have to be wielded by those around him, and Wu Zetian, as his Empress Consort, was well positioned to take charge. Gaozong's illness left a power vacuum in the court, and various factions within the palace began to vie for influence. The emperor's sickness had not only weakened his body but also his authority. He could no longer command the loyalty of his advisors and generals in the same way, and many of them saw his incapacity as an opportunity to further their own agendas. Wu Zetian, ever perceptive, saw this as a chance to secure her position, not just as empress, but as the true power behind the throne. It was in these uncertain times that Wu Zetian's political acumen truly came to the fore. She had already cultivated relationships with key members of the court, and now, with the emperor unable to make decisions, it was up to her to step forward. But this would not be a direct seizure of power. She was still, after all, a woman in a patriarchal system. Wu Zetian knew that overt ambition would only draw suspicion and resentment. Instead, she began to subtly consolidate her influence by maneuvering behind the scenes and positioning herself as the emperor's most trusted advisor. One evening, as Wu Zetian sat by Gaozong's bedside, watching over him as he slept, the opportunity for her next move presented itself. His ministers had gathered in the adjoining room, discussing the state of the empire in hushed tones. The room was heavy with tension, as no one knew who would take charge in the emperor's absence. Wu Zetian, fully aware of the brewing unrest, approached the gathering with measured grace. She entered the room, her footsteps deliberate, and immediately caught the attention of the court officials. Her presence was commanding, and though she was a woman, her authority was undeniable. The ministers fell silent as she entered, and she could feel the weight of their gaze upon her. "Your Majesty's illness has left the empire in a state of uncertainty," Wu Zetian said, her voice calm but with an underlying firmness that made it clear she would not be ignored. "It is my responsibility, as your emperor's closest confidant, to ensure that the empire does not falter. We cannot allow the court to fall into chaos." The officials exchanged nervous glances, but no one spoke. Wu Zetian continued, her eyes locking onto the faces of the ministers. "We must remember that our duty is to the empire, not to personal ambition. If we are to carry on, we must work together. But it is clear that leadership is required. The emperor may be incapacitated, but the people of the empire still need to feel that their rulers are strong and capable." One of the ministers, General Li, a loyal supporter of Gaozong, spoke up hesitantly. "Empress consort, we understand your concerns, but you are a woman. Can the empire truly be led by someone in your position? We must consider the traditional order of things." Wu Zetian's eyes narrowed slightly, but her expression remained composed. "General Li, I understand that the court is bound by tradition, but times of crisis require us to think beyond tradition. If the emperor cannot act, someone must, and it is only natural that those closest to him take on that responsibility. The empire's stability cannot wait for the emperor to recover." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I will guide the empire in his stead, but I will do so with the full support of the court." The room was silent, the ministers weighing her words carefully. Wu Zetian knew that they were not convinced, but her declaration had made it clear that she was now a central figure in the court's decision-making process. Her position was not one of overt authority, but rather one of quiet strength and strategic manipulation. The next day, Wu Zetian convened a meeting with the most powerful figures in the court. As Empress consort, she had the right to summon them, but her influence was still not absolute. The room was tense as the ministers and generals sat, waiting for her to speak. Wu Zetian, standing at the head of the table, addressed them with poise. "The emperor's health continues to deteriorate, and we cannot afford to wait for his full recovery to make decisions." She began, her voice steady. "We must move quickly to secure the empire's future. The military must remain strong, and the officials must continue to govern effectively. But we must also recognize that the emperor's decisions, when made, will now come through me." There were murmurs around the room, but Wu Zetian's gaze silenced them. She continued, "I will not act without the consensus of the court, but I must have the power to act when necessary. We must avoid division at all costs. If any of you disagrees, I welcome your input now." One of the ministers, seeing her determination, spoke cautiously. "Your Majesty, we understand the gravity of the situation, and we respect your position as the Emperor's consort. However, it will be difficult to convince all factions in the court to follow your lead." Wu Zetian smiled, a smile that was at once warm and calculating. "It is not about convincing them to follow me. It is about convincing them that it is in their best interest to do so." Her voice lowered, her tone becoming more intimate as she addressed the court. "The stability of the empire depends on unity. You have all worked hard for the Tang Dynasty. Now, we must ensure that our work continues, no matter the obstacles." Her words struck a chord. There were still those in the court who would resist her rise. But Wu Zetian knew that, given time, they would see the wisdom in her approach. Over the next few weeks, she continued to expand her influence, meeting with generals and high-ranking officials, offering counsel to the emperor when he was able to attend court, and solidifying her position as the emperor's most trusted advisor. She was careful to remain behind the scenes, never fully stepping into the light. Instead, she worked as the invisible force pulling the strings of the court, gently nudging decisions in the direction she wanted them to go. Her manipulation of the court was subtle, but effective. As Gaozong's illness lingered, Wu Zetian began to gain more and more control, and those around her began to see that she was not only capable of governing, but that she was doing so with the empire's best interests in mind. Her strategic positioning within the court became undeniable. She had used Gaozong's illness as an opportunity to secure her influence, and now, with the emperor increasingly incapacitated, she was becoming the power behind the throne. No longer just the emperor's concubine, Wu Zetian had positioned herself as a key figure in the future of the Tang Dynasty, quietly, strategically, and with a deft understanding of how to wield power in a court filled with rivals. As Wu Zetian's influence over the court continued to grow, she began to engage in more deliberate political maneuvering, forging key alliances, and positioning herself as the most powerful figure in the Tang Dynasty, second only to the emperor himself. While her relationship with Emperor Gaozong was crucial, Wu Zetian understood that securing her position required more than just his trust. It was the support of influential ministers, generals, and officials that would allow her to fully consolidate power, and she was keenly aware of the delicate balance between loyalty and manipulation in the court. Her first major alliance was with one of the most respected generals in the Tang military, General Li Jing. Li Jing was known for his military prowess and his loyalty to the emperor, but Wu Zetian saw an opportunity to form a partnership that would benefit both of them. She had observed how the general's influence in the court was gradually being overshadowed by others, particularly by the emperor's closer advisors. Wu Zetian knew that by aligning herself with him, she could not only strengthen her own position, but also help stabilize Gaozong's reign, which was fragile in light of his deteriorating health. One evening, Wu Zetian arranged a private meeting with General Li Jing in the Imperial Gardens. As the night air was cool and the sounds of the court's bustle faded into the background, the two of them sat beneath a canopy of trees. Wu Zetian, dressed in her finest robes, spoke first, her tone both respectful and confident. General Li, I have always admired your loyalty to the Emperor and the strength you've brought to the military. The Tang Dynasty owes much to you, she began, her voice carrying a soft yet undeniable power. However, the current state of the court is not stable. With the Emperor's illness and the growing factionalism, I fear the empire could be torn apart. Li Jing, a man who had weathered many political storms, looked at her carefully. Empress consort, you speak of what we both know to be true. The Emperor's illness has left a gap in leadership, and the court is becoming more fractured by the day. But the path forward is fraught with risk. If we act too boldly, we may provoke those who seek to exploit the situation. Wu Zetian smiled, a touch of shrewdness in her expression. I do not seek to act recklessly, General, but I do believe that the Emperor's condition leaves us no choice but to step in and ensure that the empire does not falter. We cannot afford to wait for the Emperor to recover. The court will crumble under the weight of inaction. Li Jing nodded slowly, considering her words. And what is it that you propose, Empress consort? Wu Zetian's eyes glinted with subtle intensity as she leaned forward slightly. I believe that together, we can guide the empire through this difficult time. With your military strength and my position within the court, we can restore stability and ensure that Gaozong's reign continues until the emperor is well enough to lead again. There was a pause as Li Jing processed her offer. Wu Zetian had phrased it carefully. There was no direct suggestion of power being seized, but the implication was clear. With his support, she would be able to act as the de facto leader during the emperor's absence. I see the wisdom in your words, Li Jing finally said, his tone gravely thoughtful. But we must proceed with caution. There are those in the court who would resist your influence, and others who might use this moment to further their own ambitions. Wu Zetian nodded, acknowledging his concerns. Of course. That is why it is important that we work together. Our alliance will ensure that the court remains balanced and that those who seek to undermine us are neutralized. The general considered her offer in silence for a moment, then spoke decisively. I will lend my support to your cause, Empress consort. We must ensure that the Emperor's illness does not destroy what we have built. Thank you, General Li. Wu Zetian replied with a smile, her heart racing with the excitement of the alliance she had just forged. Together, we will keep the empire strong. In the following days, their alliance began to take shape. Li Jing used his influence in the military to gather support for Wu Zetian among the generals and officials, while Wu Zetian continued to build relationships within the court. But as with all power struggles, their actions did not go unnoticed. The other factions in the court, particularly those loyal to Empress Wang, began to sense a shift in the balance of power. One such official was Minister Zhang, a man known for his ambition and sharp tongue. He had long been a supporter of Empress Wang and had tried to maintain her position at the heart of the emperor's court. However, with Wu Zetian's rise, Zhang saw his influence waning, and he made no effort to conceal his resentment. One afternoon, as Wu Zetian entered the court, she was confronted by Minister Zhang, who, despite his status, did not bow in the usual formalities. Empress consort, Zhang said, his voice dripping with disdain. I hear that you are now seeking to take control of the empire in the emperor's stead. Do you really believe that the court will accept your rise to power? Wu Zetian, unfazed by his challenge, met his gaze with calm composure. Minister Zhang, she replied evenly, I seek only to stabilize the court during the emperor's illness. It is not a question of power, but of responsibility. If you truly wish to serve the emperor and the empire, you will see that this is the best course of action. Zhang's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing further. Instead, he turned and walked away, clearly dissatisfied. Wu Zetian knew that while Zhang's words were a challenge, they were not an immediate threat. She had seen enough in his eyes to know that he was not ready to openly defy her yet. As Wu Zetian continued to solidify her alliances, she turned her attention to those in the court who were less overtly aligned with either side. One such figure was Grand Chancellor Liu, a man of great intellect and influence, who had been neutral in the growing factional struggles. Wu Zetian arranged a private meeting with him under the pretense of seeking his advice on state matters. Grand Chancellor, Wu Zetian said as they sat together, I have always admired your wisdom. The empire's future rests on the decisions we make now. I trust that, like me, you want to see the Tang Dynasty remain strong. Liu, a man who had seen countless power struggles within the court, regarded her carefully. I have no desire to see the empire torn apart, he said cautiously. But I must also be careful. There are many powerful factions at play, and the emperor's health complicates everything. Wu Zetian smiled, her expression both respectful and strategic. Indeed. But perhaps, with your guidance and support, we can ensure that stability is restored. Together, we can protect the emperor's legacy. After a long silence, Liu finally nodded, his expression thoughtful. I will consider your words, Empress consort. If the court's stability is truly at risk, then I would be willing to lend my support. As the weeks passed, Wu Zetian's network of support expanded, and her influence grew more entrenched. Through careful political maneuvering, she had forged crucial alliances with key military figures, ministers, and officials, all of whom saw her as a necessary force to guide the empire through this tumultuous time. Yet, she knew that her position was still fragile. Empress Wang's supporters would continue to resist her rise, and there were always rivals eager to claim power for themselves. But Wu Zetian had played the game of politics with patience and precision. She had positioned herself not just as the emperor's consort, but as the true ruler in all but name. And now, with her alliances solidified, she was prepared to take the next step in her journey toward absolute power as Emperor Gaozong's condition worsened and his ability to rule weakened. The court became increasingly unstable. Wu Zetian, now a seasoned political figure, had solidified her position as the most powerful figure behind the throne. But the time had come for her to make a move that would forever change the course of Chinese history. No longer content with simply advising the emperor, she began to consider the next step in her ambition, ascending to the throne herself. The decision did not come easily. Wu Zetian had always been pragmatic, carefully considering every move before acting. She knew that the court would not accept her as emperor without a fight. The idea of a woman ruling in a patriarchal society was almost unthinkable. Yet, the more she thought about it, the more she realized that the only way to secure her power to stabilize the empire, and to secure her place in history was to claim the throne as her own. She had already proven herself capable in the political arena, and the people of the empire were beginning to recognize her leadership, even if they were hesitant to accept her in such a high position. One evening, as the emperor rested in his chambers, surrounded by his ministers and doctors, Wu Zetian sat alone in her private quarters, contemplating her next move. She knew the path ahead would be fraught with danger. If she declared herself emperor, she would face opposition from powerful factions in the court, men who had long held power and believed that only a male ruler could lead the empire. Yet, as she sat in silence, she realized that the empire had been built on the back of strong, decisive leadership, not tradition or gender. To maintain the stability of the empire, someone had to take control, and that someone was her. The decision was made. Wu Zetian would ascend to the throne. The following morning, Wu Zetian summoned her most trusted advisors, including General Li Jing and Grand Chancellor Liu, both of whom had supported her rise behind the scenes. They gathered in the grand hall of the palace, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Wu Zetian stood at the head of the room, her posture straight and commanding. She looked around at the faces of the men who had helped her get this far, and for the first time, they saw not just the Empress consort, but the future ruler of China. Today, I declare myself Emperor of the Tang Dynasty, Wu Zetian said, her voice steady and unwavering. The Emperor's illness has left the empire without a clear ruler, and the instability in the court threatens the prosperity of our people. I will take the throne and guide this empire forward. It is the only way to secure the future of the Tang Dynasty. There was a long pause as the room fell into stunned silence. General Li Jing was the first to speak, his voice low but resolute. Your Majesty, we have always supported your leadership, but declaring yourself emperor is a bold move. There will be resistance. Many will oppose the idea of a woman ruling. It is unprecedented. Wu Zetian met his gaze without hesitation. I understand the risks, General, but I am the one who has kept this empire stable. I am the one who has ensured that the court functions despite the emperor's incapacitation. It is time for the Tang Dynasty to adapt to the reality of the present, not be shackled by the traditions of the past. Grand Chancellor Liu, ever cautious, spoke up next. You are wise, Empress consort, and we respect your judgment. But you must understand the cultural implications of your decision. A female emperor is unheard of in our history. The court and the people may not accept it easily. Wu Zetian nodded thoughtfully. I know that my ascension will not be welcomed by everyone, but the future of the empire is more important than any one person's opinion. I will shape my image not as a woman ruling as an empress, but as an emperor, a ruler who governs with strength, wisdom, and justice. The title of empress is a relic of the past. I will be called emperor, for that is what I am. There was a moment of silence, the weight of her words settling over the room. Li Jing and Liu exchanged glances, but neither spoke. They both knew that Wu Zetian had already made up her mind, and the only choice now was to support her or risk facing the consequences of opposing her. General Li Jing stepped forward, his expression one of resolve. If you are to be emperor, then we must ensure that the transition is smooth. We will need the support of the military and key officials. I will rally the generals and ensure that the troops are behind you. The last thing we need is for the empire to descend into civil war. Wu Zetian nodded. Good. I will take care of the court. The ministers and the officials who have long served the Tang Dynasty will either fall in line or be replaced. We will build a government that is strong and loyal to the emperor, not to the emperor's past, but to the future of China. As Wu Zetian set her plans into motion, the political and cultural implications of her decision began to unfold. A woman ascending the throne was not merely a political statement. It was a cultural revolution. In a society where men had always ruled, the idea of a female emperor was deeply unsettling to many. Some in the court saw her decision as an affront to tradition, while others viewed it as a necessary break from the old ways. The people, though more accustomed to strong rulers than to gender norms, were uncertain. Would they accept a woman as their emperor? Could a woman truly wield the power and authority of the imperial throne? Wu Zetian understood the need to reshape her image in the eyes of both the court and the people. She had already gained a reputation for being capable and intelligent, but as Empress consort, she had still been seen by many as a secondary figure. Now, as emperor, she would have to assert her authority in a way that left no room for doubt. In the coming weeks, Wu Zetian began to craft a public image of strength. She made public speeches, addressing both the court and the people, emphasizing her vision for a prosperous and united Tang Dynasty. She made it clear that she would rule with both wisdom and justice, that her reign would not be one of tyranny but of reform. She implemented policies that rewarded merit, not birthright, and she took a more direct role in the governance of the empire, overseeing the decisions of the court and making key appointments herself. One day, as Wu Zetian addressed a gathering of her officials, she spoke with a calm but commanding presence that left no room for doubt. The Tang Dynasty has always been known for its strength, but strength does not come from tradition alone. Strength comes from the ability to adapt, to evolve, and to lead with wisdom. I am the emperor of this empire, and I will rule it as such. Her words echoed through the court, and though many ministers and generals were still wary, they could no longer deny that Wu Zetian had become the most powerful figure in China. Her ascension to the throne was not just a political act. It was a cultural declaration that the old order, based on rigid gender roles and patriarchal norms, was changing. Wu Zetian had become the first female emperor in Chinese history, and her reign would forever change the future of the Tang Dynasty. As she solidified her rule, Wu Zetian's presence as emperor grew ever more commanding. She understood that the empire needed her, and that it was her moment to not just lead, but to leave a lasting legacy. The title of Empress was no longer enough for her. She had ascended to the position she was always meant to hold, Emperor of the Tang Dynasty. The transition from Empress consort to emperor was not without its share of challenges, and Wu Zetian quickly learned that the imperial court was a brutal battleground for power. While she had gained the throne, there were many who still saw her rise as an affront to the traditional order, and even within her own inner circle, There were those who sought to usurp her. The competition for power in the Tang imperial court was intense, and Wu Zetian was surrounded by rivals who sought to weaken her rule. In order to secure her reign, she would need to outsmart and remove those who threatened her authority. One of the first challenges she faced came from her own family. Despite Wu Zetian's position as emperor, her sons, especially the eldest, Li Hong, were seen by many as potential heirs to the throne. At court, there were whispers that the emperor's sons were more suitable rulers than their mother, especially as she was still a woman, despite her impressive capabilities. Li Hong, the crown prince, was the official heir, but his influence in the court had been steadily diminished by Wu Zetian's rise. There were growing rumors that he had the support of some of the ministers and generals, and some began to question whether Wu Zetian's rule was as secure as it appeared. One evening, Wu Zetian invited her eldest son to speak with her privately in her chambers. Li Hong entered cautiously, aware of the tension that had been building between them. His face was a mixture of uncertainty and frustration, as he had begun to sense that his mother's increasing power was cutting him out of the role he had been groomed for since birth. "Mother," Li Hong began, his voice respectful but laced with a hint of defiance. "I know the court is in turmoil, and that you have done much to stabilize the empire, but the people are beginning to question whether a woman can truly rule. It is time that I step forward and take on more responsibility. The court would welcome a male heir to take charge." Wu Zetian, ever composed, regarded her son with a mixture of affection and calculation. "Li Hong," she said softly, "you are my son, and I will always support you. But this empire needs a ruler who can command the loyalty of the court and the military, not just the people's favor. If you want to lead, you must first prove that you are capable of understanding the delicate balance of power that is required to govern. There are many who would seek to use you to weaken my reign, and I will not allow that to happen." Li Hong's expression darkened, and he clenched his fists. "You mean you will not allow me to lead?" he snapped. "You have already taken everything for yourself. What more do you want?" Wu Zetian's eyes flashed with an intensity that made her son pause. "I want stability for the empire, and if that means I must rule longer than you expected, then so be it. I did not fight my way to the top only to relinquish power because of tradition or the whims of a few ministers." Li Hong stood silently for a moment, his anger rising, but Wu Zetian's icy composure and cold logic stifled any further outburst. She knew that his frustration could be dangerous, and that he, like many others in the court, could be used against her if the right factions rallied behind him. As Wu Zetian made her decision to keep Li Hong's ambition in check, she also turned her attention to another source of potential trouble: her closest rivals within the court itself. One such rival was General Zhang, a former supporter who had grown disillusioned with her increasing power and had begun to make moves to secure his own position. Zhang had served the Tang Dynasty loyally in the past, but now, as the emperor's rule became more consolidated, his influence was slipping. Seeing Wu Zetian as a threat to his position, he began to forge secret alliances with officials who still supported the traditional power structures of the court. Wu Zetian, aware of Zhang's growing ambitions, decided to confront him directly. She summoned him to the palace, where he arrived with a sense of confidence, unaware of her growing suspicion. He stood before her in the grand hall, his eyes gleaming with arrogance. General Zhang Wu Zetian began, her tone measured and cold. You have served the empire well, but your recent actions have raised questions. You have been speaking to those who are unhappy with my rule, and I understand that you've been trying to rally support among my enemies. Zhang stiffened, but he quickly recovered, his voice smooth. Your Majesty, I have no intention of undermining your rule. I only seek to ensure that the empire remains strong and stable. We both know that a female ruler is an anomaly. There are those who believe that the military should have a more prominent role in leadership. Wu Zetian's gaze hardened. Do not mistake me for someone who will tolerate open rebellion in my court, General. I know exactly what you are doing, and I will not allow you to tear this empire apart. If you truly wish to serve the people, then you will fall in line and support my rule. If not, then you will face the consequences. Zhang faltered, sensing that Wu Zetian's warning was not a mere threat. I do not wish to defy you, Empress, he said quickly, his face growing pale. But the military must have a voice in the decisions that affect the empire. Wu Zetian leaned forward slightly, her voice low but firm. You misunderstand, General. The military is part of my rule, as is every part of this empire. But if you continue to undermine my authority, you will find that there is no place for you here. This is your final warning. Zhang swallowed hard, clearly intimidated. I understand, Your Majesty, he said, bowing his head. I will remain loyal. Over the next few weeks, Wu Zetian used her political maneuvering to further eliminate rivals and secure her position. She consolidated her control over the court by removing those who posed a threat, replacing them with officials who were loyal to her. The military, once a potential source of unrest, was now firmly under her control. General Li Jing, who had been her ally from the beginning, helped solidify her position within the armed forces, ensuring that the generals remained loyal to her. As Wu Zetian continued to outsmart and eliminate rivals, she turned her attention to the growing influence of certain factions within the court. She was well aware that many of her rivals were merely biding their time, waiting for an opportunity to strike. But Wu Zetian had become an expert in reading the court's intricate web of alliances and rivalries. Every move she made was calculated. Every word spoken to her was weighed with care. She began to manipulate these factions, subtly turning them against each other, ensuring that they were too divided to pose a real threat to her rule. In one such move, Wu Zetian invited a group of dissenting ministers to a private meeting, where she presented them with a proposal for reform. She knew that many of them were dissatisfied with the way the empire was being governed, and she used their discontent to her advantage. Your concerns about the current state of the court are valid, she said, her voice calm but persuasive. But change cannot come from rebellion. It must come from within. If you wish to see reforms, then you must work with me. Together, we can ensure that the empire is stronger than ever. The ministers, seeing the wisdom in her words, agreed to her terms. Wu Zetian's ability to manipulate factions and play them against each other further solidified her hold on power. She had mastered the art of political maneuvering, and with each victory, her position grew stronger. As Wu Zetian eliminated rivals and consolidated her power, She also began to implement more sweeping reforms that helped to stabilize the empire. She strengthened the bureaucracy, rewarded loyalty over birthright, and promoted individuals based on merit rather than their family connections. Her reign, though built on cunning and political manipulation, would go on to be remembered for its efficiency, prosperity, and the profound changes it brought to Chinese society. But even as Wu Zetian's power grew, she knew that the court was still a place of constant intrigue, where new challenges and rivals would emerge at any moment. For now, she had secured her reign, but she also understood that maintaining power in the imperial court was a delicate balance. She had defeated many of her rivals, but the game of power was far from over. Wu Zetian's reign, marked by political intrigue and controversy, was also a time of remarkable reform. As the first and only female emperor of China, she understood the importance of securing the Tang Dynasty's future, and she knew that the way to do so was through structural improvements that would benefit the people, strengthen the government, and stabilize the empire. Her approach was pragmatic, focused on merit, efficiency, and the long-term prosperity of the state. Under her leadership, Wu Zetian would implement reforms that impacted the military, the economy, and the social structure, laying the foundation for the continued success of the Tang Dynasty. One of Wu Zetian's primary goals was to reform the imperial administration. When she took control, the government was bogged down by corruption, inefficiency, and entrenched power structures that favored the aristocracy. The court was filled with officials who had gained their positions through family connections rather than ability. Wu Zetian understood that for the Tang Dynasty to flourish, the empire needed a more competent and meritocratic bureaucracy. She began by reshaping the civil service system, ensuring that appointments were made based on merit rather than noble birth. This was a radical departure from the traditional system, where the elite controlled most of the key positions in government. Wu Zetian's reforms aimed to open up opportunities for talented individuals from all walks of life, regardless of their family background. One morning, as Wu Zetian convened a meeting with her key advisors, she laid out her vision for reform. General Li Jing, who had become one of her closest allies, sat beside her, his military experience invaluable to her plans. "Your Majesty," Li Jing began, "the current administration is riddled with inefficiency. If we are to strengthen the empire, we must ensure that the right people are in power, those who are capable and loyal to you." Wu Zetian nodded, her mind already turning over the details of the plan. "Indeed, we cannot afford to have officials who are more concerned with their family status than with the people they govern. It is time to open the door for merit-based appointments, and I will ensure that those who prove their abilities will rise, no matter their background." Her advisor, Grand Chancellor Liu, spoke up. "But, Empress, this will face strong opposition from the aristocracy. The powerful families in the court will resist your reforms. They have controlled the administration for generations." Wu Zetian's gaze hardened. "They will resist, but they will not succeed. The future of the empire depends on the strength of its institutions, not the strength of its noble families. I will not be swayed by those who seek to protect their privileges. If they do not comply, they will be removed." As she pushed forward with the reforms, Wu Zetian made it clear that only those who demonstrated true competence would hold positions of power. To ensure this, she created a new system of examinations for government officials, which allowed for more transparency and fairness in the selection process. This move was revolutionary, as it provided an opportunity for individuals from humble origins to rise through the ranks of the imperial bureaucracy based on their abilities, rather than their family connections. Over the following months, Wu Zetian appointed capable officials who had proven their worth through the new merit-based exams. She also removed corrupt officials, even those from influential families, who had grown accustomed to using their position to amass personal wealth. The changes were not easy to implement, and they were met with resistance from many in the court. But Wu Zetian was determined, and her ability to move swiftly and decisively meant that the reforms were slowly taking root. Wu Zetian's military reforms were equally important. The Tang military had once been one of the most powerful in the world, but over time, it had become bogged down by corruption and inefficiency. The officers and generals had been appointed largely based on their status and connections, rather than their military prowess. Wu Zetian recognized that a strong military was essential to the empire's security, especially given the threats from external forces and the need to maintain control over the vast territories of the Tang Dynasty. In a series of meetings with her military advisors, Wu Zetian outlined her vision for reform. The strength of the Tang military has always been its disciplined structure and its ability to adapt, she said, her voice resolute. But over time, we have allowed corruption to seep in. The military must be a place where merit, discipline, and loyalty are valued above all else. General Li Jing, who had long been a supporter of Wu Zetian, agreed with her assessment. We must remove the generals who have grown complacent and replace them with those who understand the changing nature of warfare. We need leaders who can adapt to new strategies and understand the complexities of both internal and external threats. Wu Zetian nodded. Exactly. I will appoint new leaders who understand the art of war, who are loyal to the empire and to me, and who can inspire their troops with competence and vision. The military must be a reflection of the strength of the empire, not a relic of the past. To implement these changes, Wu Zetian restructured the military, removing those who had grown too powerful or too entrenched in the old ways. She also ensured that promotions were based on military ability rather than familial connections. Her reforms revitalized the military, and the Tang army regained its former strength, enabling the empire to defend its borders and assert its dominance in the region. Wu Zetian's economic reforms were another pillar of her rule. She recognized that a strong economy was crucial for the stability of the empire. During her reign, she focused on increasing agricultural productivity, stabilizing the currency, and reforming the tax system. She worked closely with her economic advisors to ensure that the wealth of the empire was distributed more evenly, with a focus on improving the livelihoods of the common people. One of Wu Zetian's most significant economic reforms was her initiative to improve agricultural production. She promoted the cultivation of new crops and improved irrigation techniques, which helped boost food production and stabilize the empire's agricultural output. By ensuring that the empire's farmers were well supported, she was able to avoid famine and maintain a steady food supply for the growing population. "I have seen the plight of our farmers," Wu Zetian said during one of her meetings with her economic advisors. "They are the backbone of this empire. If we want the empire to prosper, we must ensure that the people who feed us are given the support they need. We will not thrive without a strong agricultural foundation." Wu Zetian also reformed the tax system, reducing the burden on the peasants and ensuring that taxes were collected fairly. By cutting down on corruption within the tax collection system, she ensured that the wealth of the empire was better managed and more evenly distributed. Her economic policies helped to stabilize the empire, making it one of the wealthiest and most prosperous periods in the Tang Dynasty's history. Despite the many successes of Wu Zetian's reign, her meritocratic policies often drew criticism, particularly from the old aristocratic families who felt threatened by her rise. Her actions, though politically effective, frequently sparked controversy. Many scholars and officials from the established families saw her reforms as an attack on their privileged positions. They whispered that her rise to power had been achieved through manipulation and ruthlessness, and that she had used her position to further her own ambitions at the expense of tradition and stability. In the court, there were constant rumors about her actions and decisions. Critics claimed that Wu Zetian had gone too far in pushing her reforms and had disrupted the natural order of things. They accused her of creating a court that was too focused on merit and ability, undermining the traditional values of loyalty and family ties that had long been the cornerstone of the Tang government. Yet, despite the criticism, Wu Zetian remained resolute. She understood that her reforms, while controversial, were necessary for the empire's survival. She had already shown that she could outmaneuver her rivals and maintain control over the court, and she knew that the benefits of her policies would eventually outweigh the opposition. As Wu Zetian consolidated her power, she continued to press forward with her reforms. She had not only revitalized the military, reformed the economy, and strengthened the bureaucracy, but she had also created a new model of governance based on merit, one that would shape the future of China for generations to come. The Tang Dynasty, under her rule, would continue to thrive as a powerful and prosperous empire, and Wu Zetian would forever be remembered as a ruler who reshaped the very foundations of Chinese society. Wu Zetian's reign, though often overshadowed by the political maneuvering and controversies that surrounded her rise to power, also left a lasting impact on Chinese culture and the arts. A ruler who understood the importance of legacy, she actively supported cultural and intellectual pursuits, ensuring that her reign was not only marked by political stability but also by a flourishing of art, literature, and religious thought. Her contributions to Chinese arts, literature, and religious practices, particularly her patronage of Buddhism, are central to her lasting legacy. Under Wu Zetian, the Tang Dynasty experienced a cultural renaissance that included the flourishing of poetry, painting, and sculpture. As a ruler deeply involved in intellectual and artistic circles, Wu Zetian sought to foster an environment where artistic expression could thrive. Her patronage extended to poets, writers, and scholars, and she encouraged the production of works that would reflect the changing times and the strength of her reign. One of the most notable ways in which Wu Zetian contributed to Chinese literature was by fostering the development of poetry. During her reign, poets such as Li Bai and Du Fu, whose works would later define the golden age of Tang poetry, found an atmosphere of encouragement. Wu Zetian herself was known to be a patron of the arts and a keen writer, contributing poems that often reflected her political ideas and her vision for a harmonious empire. One such instance was her commissioning of a grand anthology of poetry that celebrated the unity and strength of the empire. The poems were not just artistic works, but were imbued with a sense of national pride and solidarity. The anthology became a symbol of the emperor's vision and a powerful tool for cultivating loyalty among her subjects. The empire is built on the strength of its people, Wu Zetian said in one of her poems, and it is through the written word that we remember our shared strength and purpose. In addition to poetry, Wu Zetian's reign saw significant developments in the visual arts, particularly painting and sculpture. She encouraged the production of religious and historical works, some of which would become iconic representations of the Tang Dynasty's golden age. Many of these artworks were commissioned for temples and palaces, with themes that emphasized the grandeur and righteousness of her rule. Paintings from this period depicted her as a dignified and powerful figure, often surrounded by scholars, generals, and Buddhist iconography, symbolizing her connection to both the ruling elite and the religious community. Wu Zetian's contributions to the visual arts were also significant in terms of the creation of monumental sculptures. Under her patronage, some of the most impressive Buddhist statues and sculptures were created, including the famous statue of the Buddhist goddess Guanyin, which still stands as a symbol of compassion and wisdom in Chinese art. These works of art reflected Wu Zetian's own complex relationship with religion and power, as she sought to connect her reign to the divine and to the enduring cultural heritage of China. Her impact on religious practices, particularly Buddhism, was one of the most significant aspects of her reign. Wu Zetian had a strong personal connection to Buddhism, and she saw the religion not only as a means of spiritual fulfillment, but as a tool for political legitimacy. During her rule, she patronized Buddhist temples, commissioned the creation of statues and scriptures, and made significant efforts to elevate Buddhism as a state religion. One of Wu Zetian's most famous contributions to Buddhism was her promotion of the concept of the Empress of Heaven, Tianhu. Wu Zetian had long been fascinated by Buddhist teachings, and she saw in them a way to align her rule with divine will. In 690 AD, she took the unprecedented step of declaring herself the Buddhist Empress, positioning herself as a divine ruler chosen by the heavens. She issued proclamations stating that she was a reincarnation of the Maitreya Buddha, the future Buddha, and used this religious justification to bolster her authority. She sponsored the translation of Buddhist texts and supported the construction of temples, notably commissioning the rebuilding of the Longmen grottos in Luoyang. These grottos contained thousands of Buddhist statues and were one of the most important cultural and religious landmarks in China. Wu Zetian's patronage ensured that Buddhism became deeply integrated into the social fabric of the Tang Dynasty, not only as a spiritual force but also as a symbol of her rule. Through the teachings of the Buddha, the people learned the virtue of compassion, and through my reign, they will see the strength of justice, Wu Zetian said during a temple dedication ceremony. This connection between Buddhism and her rule was part of her broader strategy to create a legacy that would transcend the political and place her among the revered figures of Chinese history. In addition to her support for Buddhism, Wu Zetian also strengthened the position of Taoism, which had been an influential religion throughout the Tang period. She worked to create a balance between the two religions, ensuring that both received state support. Her reign is often regarded as one in which Taoism and Buddhism flourished side by side, a rare period of harmony between two of China's major religious traditions. Wu Zetian's cultural policies extended beyond religion and the arts, however. She also reformed education and the intellectual landscape of the empire. She established the first imperial examination system based purely on merit rather than family connections, which allowed talented individuals from all backgrounds to enter government service. This system encouraged scholarly achievements and intellectual discourse, providing a direct pathway for individuals to rise in the ranks of the government based on their knowledge and ability. One of the most striking aspects of Wu Zetian's support for education was her encouragement of women's intellectual development. In a time when women were typically excluded from formal education, Wu Zetian not only promoted education for men but also provided opportunities for women to study and participate in cultural life. She supported women's writing and poetry and even encouraged them to contribute to the intellectual atmosphere of the Tang court. Some of the most famous female poets of the Tang Dynasty, such as the poetess Li Ye, were encouraged by her to write and engage with the cultural discourse of the time. Wu Zetian's reign had profound effects on the arts, literature, religion, and intellectual life in China. Her support of Buddhism and Taoism helped to solidify their influence, and her patronage of the arts led to some of the most beautiful and lasting works of the Tang Dynasty. The reforms she instituted in education and government, particularly the introduction of the merit-based system, not only impacted her own time, but would continue to shape Chinese society for centuries. Despite the controversies surrounding her rise to power, Wu Zetian's legacy in the arts and culture is undeniable. She fostered a thriving intellectual and artistic environment that allowed for the flourishing of poetry, painting, sculpture, and religious practice. Her vision of a culturally rich and diverse empire left an indelible mark on China, and her reign was one of the most dynamic periods in Chinese cultural history. As Wu Zetian's reign continued, the very power that had propelled her to the throne also began to create deep and insurmountable challenges. Internal and external pressures started to mount, threatening not only her rule but also the stability of the Tang Dynasty itself. Despite her many achievements, cultural and political, her reign was not without growing dissent. The complex web of court intrigues, factionalism, and challenges to her authority would eventually lead to her abdication and the transition of power. Externally, the Tang Empire faced growing pressure from military threats along its borders. In the north, the Turkish tribes continued to raid, and the Tang military, though strong under Wu Zetian's reign, was stretched thin. These external threats combined with internal unrest to strain the empire's resources. The military, once an asset that secured Wu Zetian's rule, became a point of contention as factions within the army began to challenge her leadership, questioning whether a woman was truly capable of defending the empire's vast borders. The empire's military leaders, many of whom had previously supported her, began to grow disillusioned, sensing weakness at the center of power. Internally, Wu Zetian faced mounting opposition within her own court. Her sons had already been removed from power, but the tension within the imperial family did not subside. The emperor, now fully debilitated by illness, could no longer play a central role in the court. Though he remained nominally in charge, it became apparent to the court that Wu Zetian had effectively been ruling as the de facto emperor for years. But the presence of her sons, and particularly the role that the next generation would play in the future of the empire, began to spark dissent within the royal family. The most pressing of these challenges came from her own daughter-in-law, Empress Wei, who was deeply dissatisfied with Wu Zetian's dominance. Empress Wei had originally been a supporter of Wu Zetian's rise to power, but she now saw her own position as increasingly precarious. As the Empress consort, Wei had seen her influence wane under Wu Zetian's heavy hand, and she began to rally support from the other factions within the court, seeking to undermine Wu Zetian's authority. Behind closed doors, Empress Wei was joined by other high-ranking officials who had grown resentful of Wu Zetian's constant intervention in matters of state. The dissatisfaction was not limited to the imperial family. Within the court itself, ministers and generals who had once supported Wu Zetian began to question her ability to continue ruling. The old aristocratic families who had long held sway in the Tang court became more vocal in their opposition. They feared that Wu Zetian's reforms, particularly her merit-based appointments and her dismantling of traditional family power, would diminish their influence in the future. The growing dissatisfaction among these key figures made it increasingly difficult for Wu Zetian to maintain her hold on power. The shifting alliances within the court were mirrored by growing public discontent. While Wu Zetian had initially been able to secure the loyalty of the people through her political savvy and her reputation as a strong leader, cracks began to appear in this facade as her reign wore on. Many felt the length of her rule had overstayed its welcome, and rumors circulated about the emperor's declining health and the increasing influence of Wu Zetian. The perception that she was a usurper, the woman who had taken the throne through ruthless political maneuvering, grew, and this resentment found its way into the public consciousness. The growing dissatisfaction within the court and among the people made it clear that Wu Zetian's hold on the empire was weakening. The breaking point came when a group of influential officials, led by high-ranking court ministers, approached Wu Zetian with a proposition. They expressed concern over the increasing tensions in the empire, particularly the weakening loyalty among the military and the growing discontent within the court. Their argument was simple. Wu Zetian's long rule had alienated too many factions, and her abdication would be the only way to ensure a smooth transition of power and restore stability to the dynasty. Wu Zetian, ever pragmatic, saw the writing on the wall. Her power had come at great personal cost. She had eliminated rivals, manipulated the court, and removed even her own sons from positions of power. While her reign had brought stability and prosperity to the empire in many ways, the reality of the political landscape had changed. The very forces she had used to maintain her rule were now the forces working against her. At the age of 80, Wu Zetian, recognizing that her ability to continue ruling was no longer sustainable, decided to step down. In a historic and unprecedented move, Wu Zetian formally abdicated the throne in 705 AD. She handed the imperial seal over to her son, Li Zong, who ascended to the throne as Emperor Zhongzong. Wu Zetian's abdication was marked by a remarkable speech in front of the court, in which she acknowledged her own limitations and the need for a younger, stronger ruler to guide the empire through its future challenges. She spoke with a sense of resignation, but also a quiet dignity that reflected the years of political maneuvering she had endured. "I have served this empire to the best of my ability," Wu Zetian said, her voice steady as she addressed the court. "But the time has come for a new ruler to take the reins. The Tang Dynasty is strong, and it is my hope that it will continue to thrive under a new generation of leadership. I will retire from public life, but my work, my legacy, will endure." Her abdication was not without its consequences. While her son, Emperor Zhongzong, ascended to the throne without major opposition, Wu Zetian's abdication marked the end of an era. Her removal from the throne signaled the restoration of male rule in the Tang Dynasty and the return to a more traditional power structure. But her legacy was far from erased. In the years following her abdication, Wu Zetian lived in relative obscurity. She was no longer the central figure in the court, but she retained her status as a former ruler and mother of the emperor. Her reign, though controversial, left an indelible mark on the Tang Dynasty. The reforms she implemented in the military, the economy, and the bureaucracy had lasting effects, and her patronage of the arts, literature, and Buddhism continued to shape Chinese culture for centuries. Despite her fall from power, Wu Zetian's impact on Chinese history remains significant. Her ability to ascend to the throne, her political acumen, and her legacy of reforms marked her as one of China's most fascinating rulers. However, the pressures of the imperial court, both from within her family and among her political rivals, ultimately led to her downfall. Yet, even in her decline, Wu Zetian demonstrated the same political skill and pragmatism that had defined her reign, making the decision to step down at the right moment and ensuring that the dynasty she had worked so hard to build would continue, even if it was no longer under her direct rule. Wu Zetian's reign, while tumultuous and fraught with controversy, left an indelible mark on Chinese history, influencing not only the Tang Dynasty, but future generations of rulers as well. Her reign as the first and only female emperor in China was groundbreaking, both in terms of the political structures she reshaped and the cultural developments she fostered. Though her legacy has been long debated, the impact of her rule continues to resonate, with scholars and modern observers viewing her as a figure of both extraordinary political genius and ruthless ambition. After Wu Zetian's abdication in 705 AD, the Tang Dynasty transitioned back to male rule. Yet her political and administrative reforms continued to influence Chinese governance. Her establishment of a merit-based civil service exam system, although not fully realized in her time, became a cornerstone of Chinese bureaucratic practice in later centuries. Wu Zetian's efforts to break the stranglehold of the aristocracy and empower capable, loyal officials made the imperial court more efficient, less corrupt, and more focused on the needs of the state. Subsequent emperors, recognizing the value of these reforms, continued to rely on meritocracy as a way to maintain control and stability within the empire. Moreover, Wu Zetian's use of Buddhism to legitimize her rule had long-lasting effects on Chinese religious and political life. By positioning herself as the Buddhist Empress, she created a precedent for future rulers to incorporate religious authority into their reigns. Her patronage of Buddhism, particularly through the construction of temples and the commissioning of Buddhist texts and sculptures, helped elevate Buddhism to a state-supported religion in China. Later rulers, including the Song and Yuan dynasties, would continue to use Buddhism and other religious ideologies to consolidate power and enhance their legitimacy. Wu Zetian's reign also set the stage for future female rulers in China. Though her direct successors would almost all be male, her role as a female emperor remained a unique anomaly in Chinese history. But her ability to wield power in a patriarchal society has been cited as a source of inspiration for later women who sought political power. While women did not generally ascend to the throne, Wu Zetian's example showed that it was possible for a woman to control the most powerful position in the empire, albeit through political cunning and a carefully managed image. Her reign challenged traditional gender roles, and while it was not emulated immediately, it laid the groundwork for later discussions about the role of women in politics, both in China and beyond. In modern China, Wu Zetian's legacy is viewed with a mix of admiration and criticism. She is often hailed as a powerful political figure who demonstrated immense skill in navigating the complex dynamics of the imperial court. Her reign, marked by significant reforms, has earned her recognition as a leader who brought stability to the empire during a time of turbulence. Her ability to consolidate power and maintain control over both the court and the military is seen by some historians as a testament to her political genius. Wu Zetian's rise to the throne is also celebrated for breaking gender barriers and defying the entrenched patriarchy of imperial China. Yet, Wu Zetian's legacy is not without controversy. She has often been depicted as a ruthless figure who eliminated rivals with cold calculation. The mysterious deaths of her sons, the ruthless purges of the court, and her alleged manipulation of the emperor have all contributed to her reputation as a tyrant. In the eyes of her critics, she was a woman who, in her pursuit of power, was willing to go to any lengths no matter the cost to those around her. These darker aspects of her reign have often been highlighted in historical narratives, painting her as a figure who prioritized personal ambition over family loyalty and moral integrity. Historians have long debated whether Wu Zetian was a political genius or a ruthless tyrant. Some view her as a brilliant strategist who, in an age of male-dominated politics, was able to ascend to the highest office in the land and rule effectively. Her ability to outmaneuver rivals, manipulate court factions, and maintain power in a highly unstable environment suggests a level of political acumen that few could match. Her reforms in administration, military structure, and culture, as well as her patronage of the arts and religion, show that she was not only a power-hungry ruler, but also someone who sought to shape the future of the empire. Others, however, argue that Wu Zetian's ambition came at a great moral cost. Her ruthless removal of rivals, the questionable deaths of her sons, and her machinations to maintain her reign at all costs, suggest a darker side to her rule. The fact that she consolidated power through murder, manipulation, and the marginalization of potential threats is a damning indictment for those who view her actions as morally questionable. For these historians, Wu Zetian represents the archetype of a tyrant, someone who sacrificed ethics and family for the sake of power. In modern Chinese society, where gender equality has become an important topic of discussion, Wu Zetian is often seen as a trailblazer. Her position as the first and only female emperor is a testament to the possibilities for women in positions of leadership. However, her legacy is also a reminder of the complexities of power. Her ability to break through the glass ceiling of imperial China's patriarchy was extraordinary, but the way she did so through political manipulation, ruthlessness, and control raises questions about the cost of achieving such success. In contemporary China, Wu Zetian's story is also used as an example in discussions of leadership, especially in terms of how power can be both a tool for achieving great things and a dangerous weapon when wielded without restraint. Her rise, while inspiring, is also a cautionary tale about the consequences of unchecked ambition and the lengths one might go to in order to secure one's place in history. Wu Zetian's legacy is a complex and multifaceted one, and historians continue to grapple with her role in Chinese history. Was she a political genius who ruled an empire with foresight and wisdom? Or was she a ruthless tyrant who would stop at nothing to maintain power? Perhaps she was both a woman who, against all odds, claimed the highest office in a male-dominated society and used her cunning and intellect to build an empire that flourished during her reign, but whose ambition came with a price. Ultimately, Wu Zetian remains one of the most fascinating and polarizing figures in Chinese history. Her legacy, one of both brilliance and controversy. Wu Zetian's life was filled with intrigue, drama, and political brilliance. She fought against her gender and social expectations to carve out a place as one of China's most significant rulers. From her rise through the imperial harem to becoming the only woman to ever rule as emperor, Wu Zetian navigated court politics with unmatched skill. Her reign saw sweeping reforms in government, the military, and religion. And while her rule is often remembered for its ruthlessness, it also set the stage for long-lasting cultural and political changes in China. What do you think? Was Wu Zetian's rule an inspiration or a cautionary tale? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and let's discuss. Was she a visionary who reshaped the empire, or a ruthless tyrant who went too far to hold on to power? History is full of amazing stories. Who will we uncover next? Stay tuned for our next video, where we will dive into another extraordinary ruler who changed the course of history. Good night.